Today, we become legends.
The removal of boots was the best change Smite has made in years. Hey, my name's Inter, welcome back to the channel, and if you're new here then be sure to subscribe for all my content coming soon. The boots removal is something I've been a proponent for in Smite for a long time. I've always viewed boots as sort of starter items in a way because they were something that everyone has to buy with a very few exceptions. And there was usually like a different choice that was optimal for different gods. Even with blessings, it still just made no real sense to me that you literally had a starter item whose purpose was to be cheap and provide a good early game stats. But then you were forced to buy boots afterwards, which at its core is just a cheap early game item with good stats that everyone has to buy. It's basically a second starter item. But with the addition of the speed potion, it just became very obvious that Hi-Rez had set themselves on a path to removing boots at some point, but perhaps they just weren't sure about how to go about it just yet. It's great to be in the late game and have a full 6 item build without being held down by an item you're forced to buy, so the question became, why do boots even exist at this point? The addition of the new Season 8 starters just solidifies this concept as well, since before Season 8 you would buy a blessing, then sell it late game, and you would buy boots and sell those late game, whereas starters are kept and upgraded in the new season, usually, not always, and it feels weird to be selling your boots in the same old way as usual. To be honest, I think Hi-Rez already had the boots removal planned and ready to go by the time Season 8 rolled around, and they just didn't want to shake up the early game too much by adding 16 new starters and removing boots in one patch, so they waited for mid-season. But that's the context behind it. Why was this the best change made in years? Simple. It speeds up the time where your build choices actually matter. Before the boots removal and new starter items, you would have a blessing that was basically defined by your role with few exceptions. Then you would have your boots, which were all roughly the same with some small deviation, and then finally around the 8 to 10 minute mark you would get your first item that was actually a decision on what you want to buy. Only at this point did your build decisions and expertise actually start to matter. Prior to your first item, everyone was building basically the same thing with very small deviations. The blessing for their class and their boots. Then of course, as you get more and more items, the difference between a good and bad build becomes even more pronounced. Despite the meme of Deathbringer first item builds, having a Deathbringer and boots versus Transcendence and boots in duo lane is a much fairer fight than someone with 6 trash items versus a full meta ADC build. The difference in build knowledge becomes way more pronounced the more items you and your opponent buy. Which is why the boots removal is so genius. Your choices matter a lot faster than they did before. Starter items are a whole different thing, but with the variety in starters going from you buy Warrior's Blessing because you're a warrior to, oh, I could go for Bluestone for extra clear, I could go for Warrior's Axe if I want to be tanky and safe, maybe I go Warding Sigil if I'm against a Guardian, etc, you get the idea. This combined with the boots removal means your choices matter from minute 1 in the game, and this really applies to every mode in Smite. And while you could make the argument that this nursed the bad players that don't know how to build but could just safely build boots in every game, I would argue this is offset by the amount of noobs who actually don't buy boots at all. In the previous meta, if you didn't buy boots, you were at a massive disadvantage, and now that burden is lifted from new players and they can just buy whatever they like the look of until they get a feel for what items are good on their own or look up some guides and stuff like that. I'm already seeing so many creative build ideas now that people aren't tied down by boots for the first 10 minutes of the game. It allows you to actually plan a real 6 item build and get away with it too, since between not selling your blessing and buying a new item, instead just spending 1500 gold to upgrade your starter, and not having to sell your boots, buy a full item and 1500 gold on speed pot, full 6 item builds come online a lot faster. Prior to this change, many conquest matches ended before anyone got a real 6 item build. In fact, probably the majority of matches ended before people even finished their 6 item before selling boots. Since you now have to farm around 2,000 less gold, maybe more than that, to get a full 6 item build, it allows for genuine build creativity that relies on all 6 items in the build. Previously, most builds would be crafted as 5 item builds plus boots, because planning a build around full 6 items after selling boots is just not really realistic, when it would only come to fruition in about 10% of your matches. Whereas now, I would argue it's much more than that. This is complete bro numbers, but it feels like probably 30 to 40% of games actually go for that full 6 item build now, so it's realistic to plan around it when it simply wasn't before. I'm speaking about Conquest here, of course. I'm not fully sure how it works in other game modes yet. Another small point is that this of course buffed stacking items, which at the current time I'm totally down for. The mage stacking items especially have been pretty trash for a long time and outclassed by other options like pen rush and rod rush and things like that. It's nice to see the mages sometimes opting for Book of Thoth and Warlock staff now that boots are gone. Of course, Devos and Trans were already strong beforehand, but they just got a little bit better, but I wouldn't say it's like breaking the game right now. In fact, I'm actually seeing a lot of hunters skip Devos in favour of bow rushes with Asi and things like that. The one small negative to the change is mostly felt in solo lane. Prior to the boots removal, the boots phase gave you some decent outplay and kill potential in the first 5 to 10 minutes of the game because you both weren't tanky yet. But now in solo, it feels like he has way less kill potential now because, as we all know, defense outtrades damage, and so once the enemy gets their first defense item online, it's very difficult to actually have any kind of kill potential, and that comes online a lot quicker now that boots are gone. There's often very little you can do to kill the enemy solo once they get their defense unless they're making several mistakes. But other than that, this change is nothing but positive, and as I said at the start of the video, this is something I've been long a proponent for, and I think it's worked out great so far. But that's just one man's opinion. Let me know what you think about boots being yeeted out of the game in the comment section down below, and I'll catch you guys in another one later on. Have a great day, and peace out, you nerds.